Hey guys, so today I'm making a pretty clean and simple thank you card, and I'm going to be using a stamp set from Stampin' Up! Called Floral Phrases and a thinlet called the Detailed Floral Thinlet for the background of the card. And I already have a piece of paper cut down, and I'm going to be using 2 out of the 3 pieces that come in this thinlet die set. And this white piece of paper measures 5 and 7/16 by 4 and 3/16. And I've set the dies down so that they are lined up so that I have an even border around the edge with a portion for me to stamp my sentiment. And I'm going to be using my Big Shot machine to cut this piece of paper out using the dies. And I've switched over to the new adapter and base plate from Stampin' Up! And because I'm cutting a detailed die, I decided to run this through the Big Shot twice. And you'll be able to see in just a moment that running this through twice with just this new platform gave me a really detailed cut. And I didn't need to use any type of shim or any type of adapter plate to get these detailed cuts to come out cleanly. I have removed the die from the paper very carefully by just wiggling it back and forth, and you'll be able to see here shortly how detailed this die is, and most of the pieces came out right inside the die. I didn't have to do a whole lot of cleanup, but I did have to be very careful removing it so that it didn't damage the paper. Any pieces that didn't fall out on their own, I just used a piercing tool to knock them out the back. Now I'm ready to move on to my sentiment, and I'm going to be using a sentiment from the Floral Phrases stamp set, like I said, that says a special note of thanks to you. And before I stamp my greeting down, I'm just going to go ahead and use a little bit of removable adhesive to secure this panel down to my cutting mat. That way it doesn't move around while I'm stamping. And I've pre-stamped the image on my Stamp-A-Majig and lined it up so that I can stamp it in Versamark ink. And the reason I'm stamping this image in Versamark ink is because I'm going to be doing a little bit of heat embossing. So after I have this image stamped and I'm confident that it's stamped cleanly, I'm going to cover it with a little bit of gold embossing powder and then set that gold embossing powder using my heat tool. And I let my heat tool heat up just a little bit before I started melting this embossing powder, just so that I could prevent the paper from warping as much as possible. Now for the back portion of the card, I'm going to be using a little bit of gold glimmer paper, but this particular scrap is not big enough. So I'm just going to cut it in half so that the gap is underneath the sentiment on the front panel. So I'm just going in and removing a little bit of that temporary adhesive that I initially used to hold the panel down, and I'm going to apply liquid glue throughout the design. This way I can attach that glimmer paper straight down. And unfortunately, the glimmer paper isn't going to adhere straight down. As you can see, it's got a little bit of a curl to it. So I'm just going to set an acrylic block on top and wait for it to dry. Next, I'm going to go ahead and repeat that same exact process on the bottom portion of the card, applying a little bit of liquid adhesive and then adhering the glimmer paper down and then using an acrylic block to wait for the whole panel to dry. While that front panel is drying, I'm going to move on to the actual card base of the card panel, and I'm going to use a little bit of a removable adhesive to attach this card down to my cutting mat so it doesn't shift, so I can stamp my sentiment. I'm going to be heat embossing this sentiment just like on the outside of the card, and this sentiment also comes from the Floral Phrases stamp set. So I've gone ahead and I stamped my Stamp-A-Majig so that I can get this sentiment aligned on the inside of the card. So once I've stamped it down in Versamark ink, I'm going to go ahead and apply my gold embossing powder and heat set it using my heat tool. Now, one thing you should note about this card panel is that it is an odd size. The card base measures 4 and 3/16 by 10 and 7/8 of an inch. And that's because I wanted no white border on the edge of the front of my card. So my card panel is finally dry, and I'm going to adhere it down to the front of the card using some fast fuse adhesive. So here's a quick look at the final product. A link to all the products used will be in the description box down below. Thanks for watching.